I'd been trying to figure out Carl's sudden mood swings for weeks, but nothing prepared me for what I heard that night. My name's Victor Lane. I'm 58, a retired structural engineer who still spends most of his days hunched over drafts and sketches. I live in Seattle, though sometimes I feel more at home in the luxury hotels I've helped design. This one, the Highland Hotel, was the last big project Carl and I finished together. Carl and I met up at the Penthouse Lounge to celebrate the hotel's anniversary. Carl was his usual self, charming, half distracted, and already 3 drinks in before I'd even sat down. Amelia, my wife, had joined us too, perched in the seat opposite me, her eyes fixed on the glow of her tablet. The fire was crackling in the hearth, the orange light dancing across Amelia's face. She looked beautiful, in that distant sort of way. She always did. Carl left early, saying he had an early meeting in the morning. As he disappeared into the elevator, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Relief? Hard to say. Amelia didn't look up from her tablet until the elevator doors had closed. Then she said it. So calm, so offhand it almost didn't register at first. I slept with Carl, she said, tapping the screen like she was reading out the news. But relax, it meant nothing. My first thought was that she was joking, but Amelia never joked about things like this. She kept scrolling through her slides, like she was looking for the next point in her presentation. I watched her for a moment, just watched her. The way she held herself so perfectly still, the firelight flickering over her cheekbones. I didn't say anything right away. I just reached for the glass of water in front of me and took a slow sip, my fingers tracing the condensation along the rim. My mind was buzzing, 1,000 thoughts all at once, but I didn't let any of them show. How long? I asked finally, my voice as steady as I could make it. She didn't even look at me. A few weeks, she said, flipping to the next slide. It was after that Portland trip you two took for the Green Building Conference. You know how he is, persuasive. She almost sounded amused, like she was talking about some harmless mistake. I set the glass down carefully. My pulse was pounding in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice low. She sighed, still scrolling. I thought you should know. Better than you finding out some other way. She looked up finally, her eyes cool and unreadable. It was nothing. Don't make it into something. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under me. My hands were resting on the armrests, but I could feel them tightening, the knuckles whitening. I didn't shout. I didn't ask questions I knew she wouldn't answer. Instead, I watched her, the way her shoulders relaxed a little when she saw I wasn't going to make a scene. In that moment, I realized something. She thought she had the upper hand. She thought I'd sit there, wounded and confused, and beg for an explanation. I wasn't going to give her that. I picked up the water pitcher and poured myself another glass. My hands were steady now, my thoughts already shifting to the next step. I'd spent my life calculating risks, finding flaws, making sure everything I built could stand the test of time. I wasn't about to let this, her betrayal, Carl's weakness, break me. She thought I wouldn't leave. She thought I'd accept this as just another crack to patch up. But she didn't know me at all. I set the glass down and met her eyes across the table. Noted, I said. Thank you for your honesty. She blinked, just once, like she hadn't expected that. I stood up slowly, my joints stiff from sitting so long. I'm going to the guest room, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. You can finish your work here. She didn't say anything as I walked away, just kept scrolling through her slides, like nothing had changed. But everything had. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew this was just the beginning. The guest room still smelled faintly of cedar from when my sister stayed here last summer. I hadn't been in there much since, but tonight, it felt like the only place that was mine. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city skyline, the same view we'd had for years. Funny how something can feel like home and a prison all at once. I turned away from the window and started opening drawers. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Maybe a distraction, maybe a reason to keep moving. That's when I found it, an old leather-bound sketchbook, shoved in the back of the dresser like an afterthought. The edges were worn, and the first page had my name scrawled in pencil, dated 2008. Back when Amelia and I first bought this place. Back when everything still felt new. I flipped through the pages slowly, my hands tracing the lines and angles of old dreams. Drawings of buildings I designed, projects that had never been built, notes in the margins about load-bearing walls and sustainable materials. The last page was blank. I picked up a pen from the nightstand and stared at that empty page for a long moment. Then, in small, careful letters, I wrote, "She thinks I won't leave." The words stared back at me, sharp and cold. I paused, then scratched a line through it and wrote something else. "She doesn't know I already did." It was like something clicked inside me. I saw it all so clearly, the way she dropped the truth so casually tonight, like she was testing me. Like she wanted to see if I'd crumble. I wouldn't. I'd spent decades designing structures to withstand earthquakes, hurricanes, floods. I knew how to build something that lasted, and how to walk away when the foundation was cracked beyond repair. I closed the notebook and set it on the nightstand. My heart was still pounding, but there was a calm to it now. A focus. Like I was back on a job site, surveying the damage and figuring out how to rebuild. I moved through the house quietly, my steps measured and deliberate. Amelia was still in the lounge, her back to the fire, the glow of her tablet reflecting in the window. She didn't look up when I walked by, and I didn't slow down. In our bedroom, I knelt down by the bed and pulled out a small vault we kept hidden in the floorboards. I had installed it years ago, back when I thought we'd be keeping important documents there, passports, birth certificates, the deeds to our properties. Now, it was going to hold something else. I opened the vault and looked at the contents, a stack of neatly organized files, a small flash drive, a black Moleskine journal that had been with me on every project I'd ever done. I added the sketchbook to the pile, my mind already racing through the next steps. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about control. Amelia thought she could break me with her little confession. She didn't realize I'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. In my line of work, you don't just react. You plan. I closed the vault and locked it, the click of the mechanism echoing in the quiet room. Then I stood up and took one last look around, at the bed we'd shared for years, the walls I'd painted with my own hands. None of it felt like home anymore. I turned off the light and left the room, the door clicking shut behind me. Amelia didn't know it yet, but she'd already lost. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I sat at the small desk in the guest room, my old laptop humming quietly as I logged into the secure server I'd set up years ago. Originally, it was for project blueprints, 3D models, and progress photos. Now, it had a new purpose. I clicked through folders of job sites, thumbnails of concrete and steel, and the dreams of 100 clients. Then I found the folder I'd created late last night, breach of fiduciary and marital trust. It sounded clinical, but it felt right. This wasn't about my feelings. This was about facts. I started with Amelia's calendar. Her excuses for late nights and early mornings had always seemed harmless, a last-minute presentation, an early breakfast with a client. But as I pulled up the sync logs from her phone, I saw the truth. March 2nd, dinner with a client. Carl's name showed up on the reservation confirmation. March 9th, team drinks at a rooftop bar, the same bar Carl and I used to celebrate winning our first big contract. March 15th, she said she was working late. The security footage from our building showed Carl's car pulling up at 9:30. I sat there in the glow of the screen, each detail tightening something in my chest. But I didn't let it distract me. I cataloged everything, timestamp by timestamp. Cross-referenced Amelia's excuses with Carl's travel calendar, matching up dates and places like it was another structural plan. Then the financials. I pulled up our joint accounts, the ones I had set up to make sure she never had to worry about money. Small transfers I hadn't noticed before, charges at hotels we'd never stayed in, dinners at places she used to say were too expensive for us. I printed everything. I wanted it in my hands, tangible and real. Paper had weight. It was harder to ignore than a file on a screen. The printer hummed as it spat out page after page. Receipts, transfers, hotel bookings. I didn't rush. I let the steady rhythm of the machine fill the room, each sheet a small monument to the truth she thought she could hide. I took breaks to sip my coffee, to look out the window as the sun rose over the city. But I never stopped working. My mind had gone quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. I knew what I was doing. I knew why. When I was done, I stacked everything neatly in a manila folder, labeling it in block letters, breach of fiduciary and marital trust. I pressed my hand to the cover for a moment, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't just for the divorce, though that was coming. This was for Carl too. The business we'd built together, the trust we'd shared, all of it laid out in black and white. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a smaller notebook, one I'd kept for work notes. I flipped to a clean page and started making a checklist. Financial transfers, geotags and security footage, Carl's calendar entries, Amelia's travel receipts, synced messages, I ticked each item off as I went, methodical and precise. I didn't want to miss anything. By the time I was done, the sun was high in the sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia, a casual question about dinner plans, as if everything was normal. I didn't answer. I slipped my phone into my pocket and turned back to the stack of evidence on my desk. This was the end of something. But it was also the start. I gathered everything up, tucking the folder into my briefcase. I paused for a moment, breathing in the quiet of the room. Then I stood, my steps slow and deliberate as I left the guest room and walked through the house. Amelia was in the kitchen, her back to me as she tapped away on her tablet. She didn't look up when I passed. She didn't even sense what was coming. And that was fine with me. Because this time, I wasn't just reacting. I was ready to rebuild my way. I drove out of the city just after dawn, the backseat of my car filled with the evidence I'd gathered. The morning sky was still a pale blue when I pulled up the gravel driveway to Evelyn's estate. She bought the place after retiring from litigation, a quiet fortress on the edge of the Sound, surrounded by tall pines and rolling fog. Evelyn opened the door before I even knocked. She was wearing a navy blazer and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. "Victor," she said, her voice even, her eyes sharp. "Come in." The house smelled like strong coffee and cedarwood. Evelyn led me to her study, a sunlit room filled with shelves of legal texts and a single, massive oak desk. I set the folder down in front of her, my hand steady. She flipped through the pages quickly, her brow furrowing. "This is extensive," she said finally, looking up at me. "But you didn't bring me a divorce case." "No," I said, leaning back in the chair. "I'm not here for a clean split. I'm here to take down everything, the business, the trust, the entire partnership." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You want to burn it down?" I met her gaze. Quietly, efficiently, and without warning. She closed the folder and sat back, studying me. "You're not angry," she said. "You're resolved." "I've spent my life fixing problems," I said. "I'm done fixing theirs." Evelyn was silent for a moment. Then she gave a small nod. "All right, let's talk about how we do this." She pulled out a legal pad and started jotting notes as I laid out the plan. Emergency asset freezes. Non-compete clauses for key clients. Legal notices to dissolve the partnership with Carl, all of it laid out in a calm, deliberate tone. "I want the board notified of internal violations," I said. "Amelia's misuse of company funds. Carl's breach of fiduciary duty." Evelyn's pen scratched across the page. "You're sure about this, Victor? Once we start, there's no going back." I looked out the window, the trees swaying gently in the morning breeze. "I've never been more sure of anything." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "You always did have a gift for precision. Let's put it to good use." We worked through the morning, drafting emergency motions and gathering the final paperwork. Evelyn's questions were sharp, her focus absolute. She didn't ask for the messy details. She didn't care about the heartbreak. She cared about the law and about making sure I came out on top. By noon, she had everything she needed. She closed the folder and looked up at me. "You're going to blindside them," she said. I nodded. "They've had enough chances to fix this. Now it's my turn." Evelyn stood and offered her hand. "I'll file everything today. The first notices will go out before they even know what's happening." I shook her hand, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. "Thank you, Evelyn." "Don't thank me yet," she said, a small smile flickering at the corners of her mouth. "This is just the opening shot." I left her estate with the sun high in the sky, the weight of the folder gone from my hands. As I drove back down the winding road, I felt lighter than I had in months. The time for talking was over. Now, it was time to build something new, and to make sure they had no part in it. By the time I got back to the city, the first cease and desist letters had already been emailed out. Evelyn didn't waste time. She'd always been like that, sharp, efficient, and cold when she needed to be. I sat in my office, a quiet corner of my consultancy suite overlooking the waterfront, watching the morning light spill across the harbor. My phone buzzed once, then again, and again. Amelia was the first to call. I let it ring out. Then came Carl's name, flashing on the screen like an alarm. I ignored him too. At noon, I went down to the shared office space we'd used for years, the one where I'd spent countless late nights with Carl, planning our dreams out on whiteboards and scraps of napkin. I placed a plain, sealed folder on the glass conference table. One word written in bold, block letters, nullified. I didn't stay to watch them find it. I didn't want to see the panic, the confusion in their eyes. Let them figure it out on their own time. By 1 o'clock, the board of our joint venture was meeting without me. Evelyn had made sure they received the dossier, every file, every charge, every hotel receipt. Amelia and Carl couldn't deny it anymore. They were exposed, and the board wouldn't take long to act. I sat in my car outside the office for a moment, watching the door. The afternoon sun was warm on the windshield, but inside, I felt nothing but cold resolve. My phone buzzed again, another call from Carl. This time, I picked up. "What the hell, Victor?" he snapped, his voice tight and breathless. "You can't do this." "It's already done," I said quietly. "Check your email. Or the office mailbox. It's all there." "Victor, don't be," his voice faltered. It's not what you think it is." I almost laughed. "No, Carl. It's exactly what I think it is. You made your choice. Now you live with it." I hung up and set the phone aside. Let them scramble. Let them feel the walls closing in. A couple of hours later, my lawyer called. Amelia's corporate card had been frozen. Her apartment lease terminated under a clause she never bothered to read. Evelyn moved quickly, freezing her out of the company health care plan and revoking her employee benefits. All by the book. All in line with the policies we'd once written together. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the calm that came after a storm. I'd spent my life trying to build things that lasted. Trying to fix every crack, every weakness, like I could hold it all together by sheer will. But some things weren't worth fixing. I walked down to the waterfront as the sun dipped low, the water turning gold and red. I watched the ferries glide across the bay, the city moving on, indifferent to the drama playing out in boardrooms and courtrooms. Carl and Amelia thought they were safe behind their lies. They thought I'd keep patching things up, keep fixing what they broke. But I wasn't that man anymore. Back at my office, I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the silence. My thoughts were clear, my mind focused. I didn't need to see them fall apart. I didn't need to hear the excuses. I'd already built my exit, and in the end, it was stronger than anything we'd ever built together. The next morning, the call started. Amelia first. Her voice was shaking when she left the first message. "Victor, please, we can fix this. Let's just talk, okay? Don't be cruel." I listened to the message once, then archived it. My phone buzzed again an hour later, another message from her, this time sounding more desperate. "You don't have to do this. I know I hurt you, but please, don't punish me like this." I didn't reply. I didn't even read the words, just watched them stack up like bricks in a wall between us. At the same time, Carl's world was cracking open. The board had met. His name was officially removed from our consultancy's leadership. Word spread fast in our circle, especially after I sent a quiet, polite email to our most loyal clients, a heads up that Carl was no longer affiliated with the firm and that any sabotage he'd tried was already documented and contained. It didn't take long for the rumors to snowball. Carl's biggest client, the one he'd always bragged about, pulled out within 24 hours. Others followed. His phone must have been buzzing with questions, but I didn't care. I was done being the buffer between him and the consequences. A couple of days later, I heard from Dana, Carl's wife. She'd gotten an anonymous package in the mail filled with receipts and hotel logs. I hadn't sent it directly, but I knew exactly where it had come from. She called me once. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't owe her an explanation any more than I owed Carl a chance to fix what he'd done. Back at home, I was packing up a few things, getting ready to leave for a few days. A small lakeside cabin up north that I'd bought years ago but never had time to use. It was a quiet place. No cell service, no endless buzzing of email notifications. Just water and wind and the space to finally think. From the corner of my eye, I watched Amelia pacing through the living room, her phone pressed tight to her ear. She didn't know I could see her from the upstairs landing. She was crying or trying not to. "He's not answering me," she whispered to whoever she'd called. "He's just gone." I closed the door quietly and left her there with her regrets. On the road north, I stopped at a diner for coffee. My phone buzzed again, another message from Amelia. "Victor, please. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Just, please talk to me." I read it once, then archived it like the others. At the cabin, I settled into a wooden chair on the porch. The lake was calm, the sun setting in a soft glow across the water. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. I thought about Amelia and Carl, how they both lived off my patience and my silence, always assuming I'd be there to clean up their messes. But now, the silence was mine. It wasn't the cold shoulder of a wounded man. It was the quiet of someone who had finally stopped caring. Let them face the fallout. Let them sit in the echo chamber of their own lies and see what it felt like when the man they thought would never leave finally did. I took another sip of coffee, feeling the warmth in my hands, and watched the lake turn dark and still. The world had gone on, and so had I. 2 weeks passed before Amelia decided to find me in person. I should have known she wouldn't give up that easily. I was at the cabin, splitting logs for the wood stove, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I straightened up slowly, wiping the sweat from my brow as her car came to a stop in the clearing. She stepped out, her hair messy and her coat thrown on over what looked like pajamas. Her eyes were wild, searching the quiet trees for me. "Victor," she called, her voice breaking as she spotted me. "Victor, we need to talk." I didn't say anything, just leaned the axe against the chopping block and watched her. She stumbled forward a few steps, then stopped when she saw I wasn't moving to greet her. She let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Are you really going to stand there and ignore me? After everything?" She gestured around at the silent forest. "What, you're just going to hide here like a ghost?" I tilted my head slightly. "I'm not hiding," I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm done." She took another step closer, her eyes wide. "You can't just say that. You can't just end it like this. We're married, Victor. We're supposed to work through things. That's what people do." I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I walked over to the porch where Felix, the old groundskeeper, was sitting in his usual chair. He watched Amelia with the same quiet patience he'd always had. She followed me, her breath coming in short, desperate bursts. "Victor, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Just, please talk to me." Felix didn't say a word. He stood up slowly and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a single typed letter. He held it out to her with a small, respectful nod. Amelia took it, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the page. She scanned it quickly, her lips moving as she read the words I'd written days before. "Gone. Indefinitely." Her face went pale, her shoulders sagging like the last breath had been pulled from her lungs. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with something like fear, or maybe it was finally understanding. "Victor," she whispered, "you can't mean this." Felix cleared his throat softly, the first sound he'd made since she arrived. "A man doesn't rebuild where termites still crawl," he said, his voice low and steady. Then he turned and walked back inside, leaving us alone. I watched her take a step back, the letter clutched tight in her hand. She looked around the quiet clearing, the stillness of the pines pressing in on her. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. She turned and walked back to her car, her steps slow and heavy. I heard the engine start, then fade as she disappeared down the winding dirt road. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind in the trees. For the first time in months, I felt clean, like the last of the rot had been cut away, leaving nothing but quiet resolve. I turned back to the woodpile, picked up the axe, and kept splitting logs. I had work to do, and none of it involved her. A week later, I heard from Evelyn again. She'd been following up on the fallout of everything we'd set in motion. The calmness in her voice told me exactly what I needed to know. It was all going according to plan. "Amelia's been formally dismissed," she said over the phone, her tone brisk. "She was called into HR this morning. It's done." I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing it. Amelia sitting in that sterile room, the blinds drawn, the hush of corporate politeness hiding the finality of it all. No exit interview. No severance. Just a clean cut, the kind of cut she used to brag about making herself. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the way she'd talk about her job as if it were a game she was always 3 steps ahead of. "It's all about leverage, Victor," she'd say, smiling over the rim of her coffee cup. "Who has it? Who's too afraid to use it?" Now she was the one without leverage. I imagined her expression when HR showed her the screenshots. The logs. The flag transactions. All the things she thought she could hide behind late nights and easy smiles. Evelyn continued, her words crisp and professional. Her team chat was wiped immediately. Her badge was deactivated before she even left the room. No chance to slip anything out the back door. I let out a slow breath. And the board. They've seen enough. They're moving to formally dissolve her position entirely. The vote was nearly unanimous. She paused, just long enough to let the weight of that sink in. "They're done with her, Victor. Just like you are." I thanked her quietly, then hung up the phone. The relief I felt wasn't the rush of victory, it was quieter, more final. Like the deep sigh of a building after the last piece of scaffolding is removed. That evening, I went back to the office we used to share. I walked through the empty hallways, past the conference room where we'd once toasted new deals and sketched plans on the glass walls. Her nameplate had already been pulled from the door. I took my time, letting each step echo through the space. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was clean. When I got home, there was an eviction notice taped to the door of Amelia's apartment. I hadn't needed to see it to know it was coming. Her lease had been tied to the corporate benefits I'd helped negotiate. Without those, she had no claim to the penthouse suite she used to brag about. I didn't stop to read the fine print. I didn't need to. I already knew how the story ended. As I stepped back into my own home, the quiet was like a warm coat around my shoulders. No calls. No texts. No more illusions. Amelia had spent years thinking she could outmaneuver me, that she could twist the truth to fit her needs, and I'd just keep smoothing it over. But she never understood that the same mind that could keep a building from falling could just as easily bring one down, carefully, precisely, without a single wasted motion. And in the end, she realized it too late. I saw it first on her social media. A photo of her standing on a balcony, the city skyline behind her. She looked carefully disheveled, hair loose, a soft sweater pulled tight against her shoulders, like she was trying to look both strong and fragile all at once. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to let go, even when it hurts." I almost laughed. It was exactly the kind of performance I'd expected from her, a vague, poetic line that let her followers fill in the blanks. They didn't know the truth, of course. They didn't know about the corporate credit card she'd maxed out in hotels with Carl. They didn't know about the long nights she spent weaving lies, testing me like I was just another puzzle she could solve. The comments were exactly what she wanted. "Stay strong. He doesn't deserve you. You're amazing. Never forget that." All the sympathy she'd never earned. All the comfort of an audience that only saw what she chose to show them. My phone buzzed with another message from her. "Victor, please. Don't do this. You're better than this." I didn't even open it. I just archived it, like all the others. Another brick in the wall I was building between us. She kept sending them, one after another, each one more desperate than the last. "I know I messed up, but you're destroying me. We can still fix this. Don't be so cold." But she didn't understand, or maybe she did and just couldn't accept it. This wasn't anger. It wasn't spite. It was precision, the same precision I'd brought to every blueprint, every foundation I'd ever laid. It was about control, mine, not hers. The last message she sent was the clearest of all. "You were always cold. This is overkill." I read it once, then moved it to a folder on my server labeled Emotional Leverage, Neutralized. A quiet record of her last-ditch attempts to rewrite the story, to make herself the victim in a drama she'd directed from the start. I spent that evening in the lakeside cabin, the fire crackling in the hearth, the smell of cedar smoke drifting into the night. The water outside was black and still, reflecting the stars like a mirror. I sipped my coffee and watched the logs shift and settle, the embers glowing red in the dark. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Amelia could have her digital martyrdom. She could let the world see her tears and her cryptic captions. But she'd never get what she really wanted, my reaction. She'd mistaken my silence for weakness. But silence is its own kind of strength. And in the end, it was all I had left to give her. I spent the next month at the cabin, living quietly by the lake. I learned how to fish in the early mornings and how to let the wind and water do the talking for me. Some evenings, I cooked dinner with Kara, a marine biologist who rented the cabin next door. We met over a shared dock and a broken fishing line, and in her soft laugh and steady presence, I found a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Kara didn't care about Carl or Amelia or any of the damage they'd done. She didn't ask about the quiet sadness in my eyes or why I sometimes paused in the middle of a sentence. She just poured wine with a crooked smile and talked about ocean currents and the gentle secrets of the tide. Her life was small and honest, and that was enough. One evening, we were setting the table for dinner, plates of grilled fish, a bottle of white wine, the simple ritual of sharing a meal. The knock at the door was soft at first, then more insistent. I already knew who it was before I even moved. Kara looked up at me, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Expecting company?" she asked, her eyes curious but calm. I shook my head. "No," I said softly, and went to the door. When I opened it, there was Amelia, her hair tangled from the wind and her eyes red-rimmed from tears. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of her own choices had finally begun to sink in. "Victor," she said, her voice cracking. "Please, just hear me out." Behind me, Kara called out lightly, "Want me to pour it now, or wait?" Her tone was casual, almost playful. Amelia's eyes darted past me, seeing the second glass of wine, the easy comfort of another woman in my home. Amelia's shoulders slumped, and I saw the last bit of her bravado fade. "I just want to talk," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I didn't yell. I didn't mock her. I didn't even let myself feel the weight of old memories trying to push their way in. I don't think there's anything left to say, I said quietly. My voice wasn't hard, just final. I'm done, Amelia. She looked at me for a long moment, her lip trembling. And then she sighed, the warmth of Kara's laughter drifting from the kitchen, the clink of the wine glass against the table. A life she didn't recognize, a life that didn't include her. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Finally, she let out a breath, turned, and walked down the path back to her car. I watched her go, feeling a strange kind of relief settle in my chest. I closed the door behind me, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet house. Kara looked up as I walked back to the table, her eyes gentle and curious. Everything okay? She asked. I nodded and picked up the second glass of wine. Everything's fine, I said. Everything's finally fine. The fire cracked softly in the hearth as I sat back down, and outside, the lake was still and dark. There were no more ghosts left to chase. No more damage left to fix. Just me, the quiet, and the slow rebuilding of a life that was mine alone.